Now, you have to consider that people like this in a solitary confinement cell, pre-trial, who have to participate in preparing their own defense and get ready themselves to testify on their own behalf. Under the Geneva Conventions, if you are held in solitary confinement for more than 15 days, it is considered torture. And here it is routine to keep people in solitary confinement pre-trial while they are preparing their defense and preparing to testify for years, literally for years. So that at some point it becomes impossible to go to trial. You are simply so disoriented and so traumatized that you cannot testify on your own behalf. You can't even cooperate with your lawyer. And so you have no choice but to plead guilty. And I think perhaps one of the most dramatic examples of that was the Mohammed Warsame, who at one point was relied on for his truth by the American government. He'd been in Afghanistan before 9/11, and they wanted to get information from him, and he gave it to them. And they said, great, we love you, we want you to be an informant. And he said, I'm not an informant, I'm not going to inform on anybody, I'll tell you what happened to me. And they said, fine, then we'll charge you with lying to us. So they charged him with lying to him. And they wanted to break this man. And so they kept him in solitary confinement pre-trial for 5.5 years. And the logic behind it was that this man was so dangerous that if he ever came in contact with any other human being, somehow his ideas, his words would spread like viruses throughout the prison and kill everybody. It was a security issue. And therefore he had to be kept locked up. And finally, after 5.5 years, the lawyer went to the government and they said, he can't take this anymore, he's going crazy. You cannot drive him crazy. He'll plead guilty to anything just to get out. Give him something to plead guilty to. So they gave him something to plead guilty to. He pled guilty, and 6 months later he was released. Before he had pled guilty, he was one of the most dangerous people, so apparently in the United States. The minute he pled guilty, they didn't care about him anymore, and he was released. This shows the hypocrisy of the government, the games, the nonsense they play with people's lives. And now they've created these CMUs, these little gitmos in the middle of the country, that are essentially a recreation of the kind of conditions that exist in Guantanamo, and in which they lock the people up and they try to isolate them from the rest of the world. And so you can understand now when prisoners in these places become so exasperated with the kind of conditions that they're given that they go on a hunger strike, and they're presently on a hunger strike, we believe, although communication has been cut off, to protest what is going on out there. And these are people that we should be giving complete support to, because nobody should have to live under these conditions which amount to torture. And so I want to give you that news. You have to be aware that all across the country, places like Pelican Bay and other state facilities, people are protesting the idea that you can be put into solitary confinement either pre-trial or post-trial and held there for years at a time to try to drive you insane. It is a form of torture, and they have a right to protest that. And if they have to go on a hunger strike, we need to support them on that. So I hope you will look for that. There is information coming out about it, and I know already the Center for Constitutional Rights is organizing a big demonstration, particularly around Pelican Bay. Yeah, as an example, the person that I represented was Yassine Arab, and after he was sent off he went to the CMU in Terre Haute first, then later he went to Marion. And on the way there, they typically, you take them on a journey around the country. You go to a series of different prisons before you finally get there. But wherever you go, you're kept in solitary confinement. And so after 2 weeks, he'd been on the road, he'd been into a series of prisons, and I found that he was in a prison in upstate New York. It wasn't too far away from where I was. So I decided to go up and see him. I hadn't heard anything from him. We just got this tip that he was there. So I went up, and I was allowed a legal visit, which is a contact visit with somebody in solitary confinement. And when they brought him up to me, there was a guard that brought him up, and they put him down in the chair, and I asked him how he was, and he tried to speak. And this is only after 2 weeks in solitary confinement. He could not form the words. He would get half words out, he would stutter, he became frustrated, and he began to shake. And he finally, you could see the emotion just overwhelming him. And finally I realized the only thing I could do was reach over, and I took him in my arms, and I held him. And he burst out in tears. Now this is a man, he's Kurdish. He grew up in Kurdistan, where in a life of incredible poverty, crushing poverty, shot at, bombed at by Saddam Hussein. He was almost killed on any number of occasions. This was one tough man, one of the toughest people I've ever seen. And in 2 weeks, he had been reduced by solitary confinement into a condition where all I could do was hold him, and he just sobbed. That was how horrific it was. And I can't even imagine what it would be like to live even a year under those conditions, much less a decade under those conditions. And yet some people have lived 30 years under those conditions. This is what we are faced with as a country. We are knowingly torturing people for years and years and years. And it's terrible.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, good evening. I really like to thank you for your coming. That's made me feel comfortable. People care about our case, our situation. Okay, I just like to turn your attention. I want to focus on the situation. My husband being healed. It's a new kind of jail recreated inside the federal prison in the United States. It's 2 units now. They have 2 of them. They call Communication Management Unit, or CMU. This jail, exactly like the media call it, or the lawyer, it's been found, it's supposed to be like secret unit. It's recreated in 2006. One of the journalists from Washington Post, she found it accident. Then she started focus about it, and they tried to get more information. Okay, the situation in this jail exactly like the Guantanamo. So they like to call it, they give it 2 names, like Little Gitmos or North Guantanamo. The prisoner, like my husband, he take it as it's test from Allah, what happened, but the time he need to serve in this place, it's really not torturing himself, also the family. Like we see him through glasses. The judge asked him to, when he got his sentencing, to be served in minimum security prison. In this jail, it's worse than the Supermax, Colorado. Like they have very strict rules, no visitation. They monitor them, photo and voice 24 hours, like like the TV show when she's just put camera everywhere. The government, according to NPR investigation, it's been last year, each prisoner have 35 Muslims, so both units have 70 prisoners. Last year only, the government spent $14 million only for this 2 units. This is from our tax money. We pay this money, and the religion, there is no freedom of religion for them. Like there is strict rules. Look, if you teach Arabic or learn Arabic, we're gonna send you. It's always threaten them. We're gonna send you to the shul, where they're gonna lock him for 30 days with no communication at all with anybody. You can teach Arabic. You can't learn Arabic. You can't pray together. You are not allowed. Like sometimes. My husband, he loved to fast. We have Ramadan, but there is extra in our religion. You can fast extra days if you like. Okay, no, we're not going to provide your food. The lunchtime and dinner before the sunset. We can't keep your tray. We don't care. So most of the time, he just get that container soup and just eat it. And the big things happened 2-3 weeks ago. They all got disease like pneumonia and got sick. First start 3 of them, so they asked the warden if you allow these 3 people to eat in their room, because if they go to the cafeteria, everybody is gonna get sick. She refused. okay, just open the window, let some fresh air come. They refuse. She's doing her weekly walkthrough. One of this Muslim guy, he missed his phone call because he's sick. So they told him, that's it, you forget your call, we can't reschedule your call. By the way, now they call it, we bring this 5 regular non-Muslim people to this unit to just like balance the unit. Because a lot of people asking, oh, it's like Japanese camp, you just hold the Muslim, it's against the constitution. So if one of the non-Muslim miss his call, no problem, just go and schedule another one. So he tried to tell her, I miss my call, it's for my family. Out of nowhere, she told them, look, you guys, you Muslim, you don't believe in God. So he got shocked. He can't answer. If he answered, directly he's gonna send to the isolation room. So he just start, I'm sorry with this word, vomiting and fell on the floor and all of this. Then they bring the nurse and doctor. And she, next day, she want to apologize for that. She didn't want to go to the media or to the lawyers. She said, okay, I need to talk to one of you guys. One of them went to her room. She said, okay, yesterday I said you don't believe in God. And it's true, you don't believe in God. You believe in Allah, and Allah didn't exist. So she make it worse for them. They try to ask for halal food. They serve them kosher food. Kosher is close to the Muslim, but it's not the exact. You know, anybody in the jail, even the vegetarian, they prepare their, because this is freedom of religion in the country. When it comes to the Muslim, they refuse to bring halal food. One of them, he sent an email to lawyer or friend, no, first to his friend, said they refuse to bring us halal food. I'm gonna sue them, I'm gonna talk to my lawyer. What they did next morning, they shipped him to Supermax, Colorado. So it is really torturing them and us. Like every time when his phone call time coming, I'm afraid if he didn't call, if I don't get any letter from him, or maybe he's doing something wrong. Maybe he makes some mistake. When I talk to him, I just watch my word. I don't want to see, like even now when I talk to you, I check this with my lawyer first. What I said, what's funny about it is now the people in Egypt and Syria, they don't afraid, they are not scared. And here we are in the freedom land. We are scared to open our mouth. It's really, I don't feel this is like fair for them or their family. Another accident, as we heard in Guantanamo, that's happened a lot. I just want to tell everybody, I feel sorry to say that it's happened here. One time, they come every week to search this cell, not looking for a weapon or a drug, just to bother them. They know it's a Muslim, they don't have anything there. They get the Quran from the shelf and throw it in the floor and stand in the Quran. So when we complain, they said, oh, sorry, we didn't know this is the Holy Quran. We thought it's just a regular book. And it's going on and on. If I want to tell you about what happened, what's going on, it's going to take like days. So all of I want, please, if you can, and we have really kind heart lawyers like Stephen, nobody pay him. He do it really, I hope if we all stand, open our eyes, say no, do anything, because it's now with this 70 prisoner, we don't want it to affect our next generation in the country. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. All praise is due to Allah, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon our last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My name is James Yusuf Yi, and I'm a former U.S. Army chaplain and a former U.S. Army officer. And to give you a little bit about myself, my background, I'm a third generation Chinese American. My grandparents came from China. Both of my parents were born in the United States. My father, who was 85 years old, was born in Pennsylvania in 1927. My mom, born in 1934. So my family's been in the United States now several decades. I'm a former military officer. I'm a graduate of West Point, the United States Military Academy. And I come from a family that has served U.S. military. My father served during World War II in the U.S. Army. My younger brother is also a graduate of West Point. And my other brother is also a former Army doctor, served in the U.S. military as an Army doctor. So all of the men have served in the U.S. military. I'm also a Muslim convert. I converted to Islam back in 1991 after I was raised a Lutheran. I was raised in a Lutheran family, Lutheran being one of the more liturgical Protestant denominations. And my story and journey to Islam is a whole nother presentation in of itself. But I became Muslim in 1991, around the time of the first Gulf War, when I was serving as a young lieutenant. And during that time, I set out to become a chaplain, a Muslim chaplain, because during that time in the military, when I converted, there weren't any Muslim chaplains in the entire military. So I left active duty. I studied some Arabic. I studied Islam traditionally, and then came back into the U.S. military. And in January of 2001, I became a Muslim chaplain. And in that same year, 9 months later, the attacks of September 11th led to the opening of the prison camp in Guantanamo Bay. I was assigned to Guantanamo as chaplain for the prison camp known as Camp Delta in late 2002, November. And I was one of the few individuals who was able to talk openly and freely with the prisoners. And it was quite clear from the very first day going into these cell blocks where hundreds of Muslims were being held as suspected terrorists in these cage-like cells. It was very clear from the first day that I went into these cell blocks that these individuals were being abused, were being tortured, were being subjected to cruel behavior, inhuman, and they were being persecuted for their faith. It was understood by the military and federal interrogators that every one of these individuals was Muslim, and that as Muslims, they all believed in the concept of one God, believing in one God. And they tried to shake these prisoners of their faith by doing things like putting them inside of a satanic circle in an interrogation room, attempting to force those Muslims to bow down and pray and prostrate, like in the form of the Muslim prayer in the center of this satanic circle, while these interrogators screamed at these Muslims that Satan is your God now, not Allah, meaning not God the Almighty, the creator of the heavens and the earth. They tried to break these Muslims of that faith because they felt that it would help them get these people to talk and to give up information. There was this hysteria that they wanted to get some intelligence and stop the next 9/11 that some people thought was already brewing, planning in the works. But most of these people in Guantanamo were innocent. There were 660 or so prisoners there during my time at Guantanamo. Today there are still 169 still remaining in this prison camp, the same prison camp that the current president and commander-in-chief promised to close when he campaigned in 2008. Guantanamo is still open. But over 500 have already been released. And what does that tell you about those 500 people? Essentially that they did nothing wrong. But it was clear that these people were being abused, and I raised objections as the chaplain of this prison camp to the chain of command. And as a result, my chain of command, initially, as I believe, valued that information. Because I got a stellar officer evaluation report. I received official military awards. And then I received R&R, which is called rest relaxation. After serving 10 months in Guantanamo, I got R&R to go home, visit my family, knowing that after 2 weeks I had to return to Guantanamo and then finish my tour of duty. So I got on a plane from Guantanamo, flew into Florida at the Jacksonville Naval Air Station. From Jacksonville, I would have scheduled a connecting flight to Seattle, Washington. I was living in Olympia. Had previously been stationed at Fort Lewis prior to going to Guantanamo. So my family was in Washington State. My wife and daughter went to the airport to meet me, but nobody showed up. I never got there because I never got on that plane. I never made that connecting flight because when my plane landed in Florida, I was swarmed by immigration officers and customs officials and intelligence agents from the Army, counterintelligence agents, naval criminal investigators, the FBI. They were all there. And they made these accusations, these claims that I was carrying some suspicious documents, classified documents. And then I was arrested in secret. Arrested in secret. Nobody knew that I had gotten arrested, was put in prison. I never showed up at the airport. My wife and daughter waiting for me. They called my parents in New Jersey to see if my plans had changed. My parents didn't hear anything from me. Nobody knew where I was. It was like I had disappeared in America. I was disappeared in America by my own government. I was locked away in a super maximum security prison in Charleston, South Carolina. And when they transported me to this prison, they put me in the back of this truck next to an armed guard. I was shackled at the wrists and at the waist, at the ankles. Just like how prisoners in Guantanamo are shackled, in that same suit of chains. And then they put on my eyes these goggles that were black and I couldn't see anything. Then they put on my ears these devices, so now I couldn't hear anything. I was being subjected to what's known as sensory deprivation, because they wanted to instill fear and intimidation and confusion. And it was intimidating. It was frightening. And it was confusing. Even though I knew about this tactic. Because I had seen how they used this tactic on the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay. They put me in this cell for 76 days. Solitary confinement. Cell very similar to what you saw in the video. I was held under conditions in which, technically, I wasn't even allowed to have toilet paper in my cell unless I was actually sitting on the toilet. They didn't allow me to have anything in my cell. There were 2 cameras that had me under watch 24 hours a day. And it was like the one fella in the video, the lights never went out. I had a light switch. If I turned off the light switch at night, then another fluorescent light came on. In that cell, I had my rights violated, my religious rights. There was a prison chaplain in this facility. And when he came to visit me in my cell, what did I do? I requested from him, the chaplain, whose role is to defend my religious rights, the prayer time, so I can make my prayers, my Muslim prayers in its proper time. And I requested from him a confirmation of the northeasterly direction so I can pray towards Mecca, as all Muslims do. But the chaplain came back the next day and said, I can't give you this information. Even after I had given him the website, www.islamicfinder.com. You can type in the zip code and get the 5 prayer times for any location. He said he couldn't give me the information about Northeast. And so I understood this to mean that the people in the prison believed that since I was a trained U.S. Army soldier, if they told me which way was northeast, I would be, of course, able to figure out which way was due north, and due south, and due west, and due east. And that type of information would have helped me if I was able to escape from this super maximum prison, because then I would know which way to run. Right? Ironically, this was information that I was able to provide to the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay. I was able to ensure that in every cell in Guantanamo Bay, there was an arrow pointing towards Mecca. I was able to ensure that the prayer time, when it came in, that the call to prayer was sounded over a loudspeaker. I don't know of any other U.S. military installation that has the Muslim call to prayer played 5 times a day. But I ensured that it happened in Guantanamo for the Muslim prisoners. But as a U.S. citizen in military custody, those things were denied to me. How ironic. But after 76 days in that prison, after being accused of spying, espionage, aiding the enemy, and having been threatened with the death penalty by the U.S. military, I was released from prison. All of the accusations that were brought against me were dropped. Because when they investigated me, it came clear what I had done. That I had simply raised objections to the abuse of prisoners in Guantanamo Bay. I was reinstated, but then I tendered my resignation from the U.S. military and got an honorable discharge. I had even considered staying in the military after I had my record cleared. But after more harassment and surveillance and tension, I decided it would be much more beneficial for me to leave the military and document my experience, in which I had a book published in 2005, exposing much more than I just told you right now. And I entitled that book, For God and Country, Faith and Patriotism Under Fire. I was prosecuted preemptively, or they attempted to preemptively prosecute me, intentionally. And that's why my name is on this board. There are about 60 or so names here. 155 names. But there are many names that aren't on this board that should be. One of them is my friend Afraz Mohammed in New Jersey, a decorated Marine who came to me for assistance. He told me about his story, how as a Marine he was approached by a fellow unit member who asked if he was interested in buying a weapon. And that soldier told him, I have a handgun, 45, and I have a civilianized AK-47 that I'm trying to get rid of so I can pay my rent. And my friend Al-Faraz said, I'll help you out and I'll buy that 45, that handgun. And they kept making appointments to try and meet so he could see the handgun. In the meantime, my friend Al-Faraz went to the unit armory to register a spot where he would have to hold that weapon. He went and found out the information on what he would have to do to legally register that weapon and purchase that weapon and get a bill of sales. He did all of the necessary steps. But he never saw the weapon. And finally, the other soldier said, let's just meet in this parking lot and I'll bring it to you. And so when they met in the parking lot, the soldier brought the civilianized AK-47, which in and of itself is not illegal also. Could be a collector's item. It was civilianized. And they argued for 2 hours that this was not the weapon that he had agreed to buy. And that's on videotape. But when the other soldier placed the weapon in his trunk, in my friend's trunk, all of a sudden ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms explosives, the Bureau raided the scene. He was thrown down on the ground. He had his knee shoved in his back, and he was arrested. They took him away. They interrogated him and tried to get him to confess that he was a terrorist, that he was going to buy an automatic weapon to go kill other soldiers. He said, no, I'm not saying that. I didn't do that. They said, we're going to court-martial you. So they court-martialed him. The charge was trying to purchase an illegal weapon. And during his trial, his court-martial, a jury of his peers, other Marines, the ATF brought forth this automatic, illegal AK-47 and said this is the weapon that he tried to buy. And then when the defense said, here in the police report, the serial number of the legal weapon that was on the scene did not match the illegal weapon that the ATF presented in the trial. And all of his Marine colleagues, comrades, saw through this bogus plan that he was set up, he was entrapped, and he was found not guilty, unanimously. He was cleared. His name belongs on this chart also. He got out of the military. And now he suffers from post-traumatic stress. He's got 100% service-connected disability from the military, from the way in which he was thrown in prison, accused of being a terrorist. Even though he only served 1 day in prison, but went through this tumultuous trial and tribulation, being accused that he was disloyal to his country. He was a decorated Marine. He even served in the first President Bush's inaugural ceremonies. But this is what our government is doing. The FBI, the NYPD recently made an arrest on some case. This case of my friend was sparked by the ATF, the Bureau. I was thrown in prison by the military. So all of these government agencies are carrying out this policy of preemptive prosecution. And it needs to be stopped. One of the things that wasn't pointed out, that was pointed out in last night's program, is that with all of these names and all of the cases that we see here, not one person was killed. Not one person was harmed in any of these cases. And not one piece of property was injured or damaged in all of these cases. So this goes to show what our government is up to. And I think one of the reasons is they want to justify the billions of dollars that goes into anti-terrorism that gets approved by Congress. And they want to show that there's a homegrown threat here in the United States. But we got to put a stop to it. And we have to bring dignity back to our nation, to our government. And hopefully, with the work that the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms is doing, that will be a good step in the right direction. My name is Chaplain James Yusufi, and it's a pleasure being back here in Warren. It's my second time visiting this Islamic center, and I thank you for listening to my comments. Assalamu alaikum. Yes.
Chaplain, when did your family finally find out where you were being held?
Right, my family at first had no idea where I was. But after a few days, they understood there was something very wrong. Because the FBI showed up at our apartment in Olympia, Washington, and they proceeded to interrogate my wife. And she was trying to get information as to what had happened to me, and they wouldn't even tell her anything, whether I was alive or dead or what. Then a week later, the FBI came and raided the house and took my computer, took a whole lot of things from my house and my apartment. They had also raided my residence in Guantanamo. And what's interesting is just last month I received some of that stuff back. Since 2003, just received some of my items back last month. But my family found out what happened to me when, over 2 weeks later, they saw me on the news. It was the news story of the day. I think it was September 23rd. That the chaplain from Guantanamo Bay had been arrested, that I was being accused of spying, that I was a terrorist spy, and that's how my family learned of where I was. The day I was arrested, and I demanded that I have the opportunity to call my family and let them know that I wasn't coming home, and they refused. And then I requested that the military itself contact my family and let them know that I wasn't coming home. And they didn't do that either. So, again, it was like I had disappeared in America. And my family didn't find out until my face was on the news.
Steve, maybe you could say something about if someone is visited by the FBI, maybe what they should do and why they should do that.
Right. There persists in this country this idea that if you cooperate with the FBI, they will be grateful and they will make sure that your life is full of blessings. And that is, if it ever was true, it is certainly not true to this today. One of the things that happens is that if you go and get an interview from the FBI, they will tape record you secretly all over the place. They will tape record your phone call. They will tape record this or that. The one thing they will not tape record is the interview. And the reason is they want to be able to control it. They want to be able to say, there were two of us in that interview room and only one of you. And so we get to decide what you said. And if we decide that what you said was a lie, we've got two people to testify to a lie, and lying to an FBI officer is a very serious offense and you're going to be charged with it. And so when they have nothing else to charge you with, typically they will charge you with lying to an FBI. And then from that, they will try to get you to become an informant against somebody else, or they will try to take it to build another case out of it, and so on. So we do not believe that anybody can safely have an interview with the FBI by yourself. And so whenever the FBI comes and says, we want to talk to you, we have trained everybody to say, thank you, give me your card, I'll have my lawyer call you. And I want you all to repeat that. Thank you, give me your card, I will have my lawyer call you. Now, let's do it really loud. Thank you, give me your card, I'll have my lawyer call you. All right, remember that. Because when it happens, it's going to be very startling. You're going like, hum. What was that phrase? What was I supposed to say? Thank you, give me your card, I'll have my lawyer call you. And we believe that's the only safe way you can handle it. Anything else you say is likely to get yourself in trouble. The National Coalition, there are some good things that we were working on. And one thing that I really wanted to mention was that we believe that, first of all, there's a lot of secret surveillance going on. Massive secret surveillance in mosques, in public places, on electronic and wiretaps and so on. And the government accumulates huge amounts of information. Now, On the flip side of this, they have an obligation, an absolute obligation, that if anywhere in this mountain of information, there is information to indicate that the defendants are not guilty, that they are in fact innocent of the charge, they are required to turn it over. Now you can imagine the likelihood of the government going through mountains of surreptitious, classified, secret material to find those few nuggets that would prove that the defendants are in fact completely innocent. And so they don't do it. And they had an inspector general that went through and looked through it and said, you know, they don't do it. This is wrong. They should be doing it. So we recommend that the Justice Department start looking for evidence of innocence in this classified material. But they should also go back and review all of the cases in which this has happened to see if there was any exculpatory information, any evidence of innocence in those cases. That would be all of these cases here, because all of them had secret evidence. And because we believe that these are all fake cases to begin with, there must have been a mountain of evidence to indicate that the defendants were in fact not guilty. So we are pushing in Congress to try to get a bill passed that would require the Department of Justice to go back, Inspector General go back and review this material. And if they find evidence of innocence, this will require new trials. It may require dropping the charges. It may get all of these people out of jail. This is a very hopeful sign. The only problem is we have to get a bill through this dysfunctional Congress. We are fortunately helped along in that connection because the Department of Justice, in its infinite wisdom, decided to frame a sitting Republican senator named Ted Stevens from Alaska. And so they brought bogus charges against him and got a conviction. And at some point, the FBI agent involved with the case tipped off the judge that they had, in fact, this was a frame-up and that they had a mountain of evidence showing that Stevens was innocent. And they looked into it, they appointed new prosecutors, and the prosecutors in fact found the evidence, and so Stevens was exonerated, and the Department of Justice was suddenly being targeted because they were now clearly violating the law. They clearly not only violated the law, they had deliberately convicted an innocent man, and it happened to be a sitting Republican U.S. Senator. And boy, is the Congress upset about that. Congress people do not like having false charges brought against one of their own, for obvious reasons. So we are hoping to kind of use this as a way of raising the issue about, you're angry about innocent people getting convicted? Well, you know, there's a lot of other people that are also not so happy about getting convicted. How about we can just all agree that there needs to be a real mechanism for the government to turn over evidence of innocence, and we'll stop framing people. So that's our theory.
Yeah, let me just quickly mention some information about one of the cases up here, the one of Brandon Mayfield. Brandon Mayfield, who was arrested, was jailed under the Patriot Act for over 2 weeks, in which the FBI claimed that his fingerprint was found on a bag of detonators in Spain, thereby connecting him to the Spain-Madrid terrorist bombing. Even though Brandon hadn't left the country in more than 10 years. But when they raided his house and they took information and things from his residence, when they gave information to the judge to get further warrants, they claimed that they had seized from Brandon's house some suspicious Spanish documents, even though they knew that these Spanish documents were his 6th grade daughter's Spanish homework. But the way in which they presented to the judge, it seems like, oh, you know, Spain, terrorist bombing, Spanish documents, maybe there's a likelihood that he could have somehow been involved. But in the way they twist the information and put things even in front of judges when getting warrants is falsifying the reality of the situation. in my case, information that was presented to the military commander to get warrants to search my house in Guantanamo and things. The authorities, the intelligence agencies said things like, I have been known, that they said Captain Yi is known to have associated with those sympathetic to terrorists. They didn't say I was a terrorist. They didn't say I was associated with terrorists. They said I was associated with those known to be sympathetic to terrorists. They said that I had no less than 6 bank accounts, some of them overseas. The only overseas bank account I had was the account that I had opened in Guantanamo Bay on the naval base. It was a credit union account that I opened there so I can easily use the ATM machine and have cash while I was in Guantanamo Bay. That was my overseas account. So it made it seem like I had, hidden monies somewhere in some offshore Swiss bank accounts. And they also had said things like they had found tickets to London in my Guantanamo residence. I never had any tickets to London, but that projected the idea that I, would be subjected to fleeing. So they twist the information when they present it to the judges in such an unethical way. And then right here in Detroit, one of the first terrorist cases here in Detroit, where the case was overturned and
Oh, yes, Confinement. The Detroit sleeper cell, yeah.
no, way before Lukman.
No, this is the
Detroit,
sleeper
yeah, in which
The Algerian boy, the one in Tawheed Masjid.
the prosecutor was
Convertino was the prosecutor.
yeah, was reprimanded or something for prosecutorial misconduct. They had evidence, what's it called? It's exculpatory evidence that these guys didn't do anything. And they hid that information from the defense, and all of those convictions were overturned. So some very, very unethical things going on in the Justice Department and the way, the authorities are carrying out these particular prosecutions. Yeah.
Well, in these cases, certainly. I mean, the Justice Department used to have a pretty good reputation. No more. Nobody believes anymore that they turn over the things, they obey the law. The Mayfield case is a great example of that, because in that case, they claimed to have a fingerprint of Brandon Mayfield. The Spanish authorities looked at it and said, that's not the same. It's not identical. We know who the people are, and we're going to get the real person. The government ignored that, suppressed that, claimed right up until the end, right until the Spanish authorities arrested somebody with an identical thumb fingerprint. And then they said, oh, well, yeah, okay, maybe there is another person. But up until that time, the fingerprint, which everybody believed was individual, they were claiming belonged to Brandon Mayfield. I mean, that's the kind of nonsense that they pull. I did want to mention just one other thing, which on the other major push that we have is to try to do something about solitary confinement. We think that this is absolutely an abhorrent thing, and we've got to end this practice, both pre-trial and post-trial. And just next week, the Judiciary Committee of the Senate is going to open a hearing on what to do about solitary confinement. This is a huge break. This is the first time that the Senate has taken this issue up. And we're hoping we're going to get information down there. We're going to try to get to testify if we can. And it's one of the first opportunities we've had to make a real difference there. So things are moving. We have a good chance to make a dent in it, but this is going to be a long haul. This is not going to be an easy fix. No quick fix here.
Yeah. What kind of this can we have?
Yes, thank you. One of the things you can do is join National Coalition. When I go down to Congress and I talk to the congressperson or the senator, I want to be able to say I got 1 million people in my organization. I want them to pay attention. So I would really like it if you could sign up. And you can do that online. You just go to the website, go check on membership, and you can do that. Once you sign up, we have a way to get information to you about things that are going on. We may have a need to ask you to support, go down to your congressman and talk to them and get a bill passed. We may have prisoners that we think need help. Maybe you could adopt a prisoner, write a letter to them, or help in some other way. Maybe one of the best things you could do is get an organization together and invite us to come out and talk to them, because we've got to spread the word. The national media, although it covers this, we have some great reporters that have done some wonderful coverage of this, and you can get that on our website. For the most part, this is information that no one's ever heard of before. And if we don't go out there and start talking to people, people aren't going to learn about it. So getting invitations for us to speak is something very important. So those are some of the things that we can do. You can do to help us. But I think the key thing is to get to, if you're a member, then we can communicate with you and tell you what we need at that particular time and place.